What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Underdog Drafter Party. I'm Jake Tribbey, here as always with my co-host, one of the best football writers around in Ryan Heath. And we also have a very special guest this week. It's Tyler from the Fantasy Sanctuary. Tyler's one of my favorite Twitter follows, as he's one of the few accounts on Twitter who you can say is authentically themselves. Tonight, we will be drafting some Battle Royale teams, talking about our favorite scroll down options, and discussing contest-specific strategy throughout the show. Can also get to any pressing Week 16 questions you guys may have. Tyler, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. Thrilled to finally get to link up with you, lovely gentlemen, and drafter hard and drafter all night long. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I know we are very excited to have you for a very appropriate show, very company appropriate show. Certainly no innuendos will be said tonight. Ryan, what about you? How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah, excited to get into this underdog slate. Had a good show on cashing points just now, so excited to roll into this other format.
Yeah, me and Ryan doing the old back-to-back, second leg of a back-to-back, but no injury designations for either of us. We are playing right through, man. All right, so general show format, we'll go position by position, talk about our favorite plays. Then we'll talk quickly about contests. I don't think much has changed from last week. And then we can get into some drafts and obviously answer any pressing Week 16 questions you guys may have. Obviously, fantasy playoffs are still going on. We can also talk DFS or, of course, Battle Royale. We'll start with quarterback this week. This is a tricky-ish week for quarterback. I mean, I like a lot of the high-end guys. I don't really have any quarterbacks that I absolutely love. Ryan, I'll throw it over to you. Is there anyone who stands out to you at the quarterback position?
Yeah, so I want to start just by talking about Josh Allen because I was willing to draft him high last week, not willing to do it this week. Very unlikely that the Patriots are going to push Allen. He doesn't really hit his ceilings except in close games this year. So I'm happy to take someone else in the first round. But with that said, there is a very big projection gap from Allen down to any of these other quarterbacks. So I think something you should keep in mind when you're drafting is you want to go to an outcome, if you don't have Josh Allen, of I needed my first round pick. My first round pick really went off and beat Josh Allen. So with that said, I think it makes a lot of sense to lean into game stacks with whoever your first round pick is. Obviously very easy to do that with Jahmyr Gibbs, with like some Caleb Williams doubles. Caleb is a great way to get kind of exposure to him here without ownership, as opposed to on the main slate where there will be ownership on the Caleb Williams doubles. But yeah, it's basically free to just draft Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. It projects fairly well. It's the best game environment of the slate, most likely, 48-point over-under. So that's kind of where I'm starting thinking at the quarterback position. I don't have like anything particularly against any of the other top six, but I will say it's a good week to go with double stacks, just because there's a lot of very uncertain game environments. None super jump out aside from that Lions and Bears game. So you can go to Stafford doubles again this week. I am somewhat interested in the Sam Darnold doubles this week. Kind of whichever game environment that you are leaning towards, I would just encourage you to draft very, I guess, like have like a one-track mind for that game of this. I'm picking in this draft. This is the game that's going to go off, and every decision I make is around that.
Yeah, certainly think that's key to keep in mind. You know, in middle rounds, I think you can find yourself feeling a little lost if you don't have a game in mind in particular, because I don't know if many of the middle round options are particularly strong overall in drafts. Tyler, anyone else stand out to you at the quarterback position? I'm sort of with Ryan, where I think it's a great week for game stacks. I don't know if there are any individual plays that I really love.
Yeah, I'm deep in the weeds with like the coach speak news and the health news stuff, and so it's kind of muddied because you have like AJ Brown, who's got a potentially banged up knee from that hip drop tackle. Yep. So it's potentially a very hobbled AJ Brown versus a much improved Washington defense from where it was the first few weeks. So, you know, do they just pound Saquon into the wall and let him go, and Devonta Smith gets the leftovers? Same thing with kind of Jane Daniels of like going against a very good Philly defense. Moving Terry McLaurin around has helped them out. But is Cliff gonna freeze up against Philly? Or are they gonna go back to some stupid ways? Will Jaden struggle a bit with a pretty solid pass rush and pass coverage? So his rushing is how that is unlocked. So it's like, and Noah Brown being out is probably not great. Same with Ertz, because now there's the fill-ins are less experienced guys, at least with Cliff's comfortability and trust. And so does he just try to like get away from what's working? And so my eyes go towards just like Jared Goff and the Lions. It's become even more consolidated. Jahmyr Gibbs is even more ability for them to get the passing game going. I mean, hell, even the last 4 weeks, Monty was getting 3+ targets and receptions a game as well. So now all that work goes to Jahmyr. They have to win this game. They have to keep pushing it. You mentioned the Caleb Doubles, really fun way against the very, very, very helpless Lions defense right now. Darnold's got a really nice matchup for Seattle. They need to keep winning. Geno being in this game means it's more likely to be pushed. He'll be a little bit hobbled, so I'm definitely not interested in Seattle doubles. But Metcalf getting some really strong coach speak about getting worked in and more involved this week. The matchup kind of leans his way from some of the metrics. I believe y'all were tweeting about some of the slot matchup stuff being tough for JSN. So won't be surprised if this is with Walker and Charbonnet both healthy, we could see, just those guys getting leaned on a lot with the hobbled Geno. So yeah, the Brock Purdy doubles seem interesting, with Kittle and Jennings. Trent Williams is out, but their fill-in on the line's been pretty solid. Patrick Taylor, they trust to get in there. Pretty strong coach speak about him. And then you've got the debut of Michael Penix with a gorgeous matchup versus the New York Giants defense with all the deep stuff. And now it's just, are they going to trust him to pass the ball? Is the chemistry going to be there with the wide receivers? But the price you're paying, not bad. You're definitely not getting much rushing stuff out of him at all. But he should be able to just stand back there and deliver. But do they ease him in with a bunch of Bijan and Algier? So a bunch of different. I don't hate Rodgers doubles. They're trying to get Adams fed. They're trying to make Aaron Rodgers not look like total dog shit by the time he bounces. And LA's defense has been much improved, but they definitely aren't stifling by any means. So quick stuff to Wilson and Adams could still be there and get there. And the Drake May stuff, I wish, and this is ideally like a gorgeous like garbage time comeback for him. But they're kind of being weird. Mayo is talking about like not designing rushes for him, maybe kind of protecting him. So there's a lot of stuff to take into account, and in these top heavy tournaments, you kind of just have to hit the nuts with. And so I like some of the doubles, and I'm wary about some of the other potential traps for what projects well, but maybe not enough to push you there. And you mentioning with the Allen matchup, potentially that going on too.
Yeah, certainly like all of that. Let's move on to running back. And before we get into it, some of you guys might be wondering why my underdog ranking screen looks a little bit different than the default. It's because of the great tools over at bestballoverlay.com. Helps display your implied team totals, your regular totals, the weather, and also crucially, and this is the main reason that I use the tool, is it shows your exposures. And once we get into drafts, you guys will see you can also use the combinatorial exposure tool, which is super, super helpful. I want a lot of exposure to Bijan Robinson and Chase Brown, but I don't want those guys to always be on the same team together. So the tool is really helpful for diversification. You can save $10 a month with promo code PARTY. Again, that's promo code PARTY to save $10 a month over on the great tools at bestballoverlay.com. Also wanted to take a second to shout out our Discord. We drop free rankings in there. It's free to join the Fantasy Points Discord. A lot of channels are paywalled. Underdog Battle Royale is not, and we drop free rankings in there every Saturday right around noon. Me and Ryan Heath go through those with a fine-tooth comb. It's basically a blend of our underdog ADP and our projections. So super, super helpful for spotting quick values when you're doing your battle royales on Saturday and Sunday morning. All right, running back position, I think is pretty straightforward. All all of these top 6 running backs I like quite a bit. You can, nitpick with guys like Achane, Connor, even Bijan a little bit, but I mean, they're all just great plays. I really don't want to spend a ton of time on these top 6 guys. Ryan and Tyler, my question for you, I'll start with you, Ryan, is once these top 6 guys are off the board, and I think generally speaking, I want to leave a lot of my drafts with 2 of those top 6. Once the top 6 are off the board, what the hell do I do? Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you definitely, I wrote the same exact note, Jake, so I'm glad we're on the same page. You definitely need at least one of the top 6, preferably 2. There's kind of a tier down after that runs from Kyron through Jonathan Taylor. I do think ADP has this right, unfortunately. So the guy I like most in that is going to be Jonathan Taylor. He's been running really bad on touchdowns recently. But in games the Colts have won, he's averaging over 19 expected fantasy points per game. That's PPR weighted, but still translates, especially for a back like Taylor, where most of his production is on the ground. But yeah, he has among the best workloads in the league in games that the Colts win. They are favored by 3.5 points. So he's kind of my firewall at the position. I'm not that interested in taking any running backs after Jonathan Taylor. And I'm going to do most of my drafts in a manner that still lets me end up with 2 running backs, obviously, where I get 2 of the top 10. But I will say, I think this is easily the best week we've had all year for 3 wide receiver builds. Generally, we recommend against those just because the win rates historically have been so much worse for 3 wide receivers and only 1 running back. But just with how the projections kind of shake out, and we'll talk about some guys, I'm sure, once we get to wide receiver that are strong scroll down options there. There's a lot of wide receivers you can get in any draft that project about as well as Aaron Jones or a Breece Hall or a Brian Robinson. So yeah, this very kind of unique week for me where I'm willing to have it be more than like 5% of my drafts as 3 wide receiver builds.
Yeah, I feel like I certainly don't disagree at all, Ryan. I feel like week after week we've been talking about, running backs incredibly deep. You have viable plays down to RB12, RB14. This just really isn't the week for it. I mean, sure, these plays are viable, but I just don't see much tournament winning upside here. Tyler, anything to add on some of these, scroll down or mid-range running back options before we move to wide receiver?
I'm definitely not opposed to some of the names simply because, as far as gaining leverage on lesser drafted guys in that range, it's going to give you, we just saw Jonathan Taylor and a couple other top ranked running backs not get there last week for oddball game scripts, goal line stuff, and in Jonathan Taylor's case, really boneheaded plays at the goal line. So at that stuff like that happens in the bigger fields. I'm very comfortable going down simply because guys like Aaron Jones versus the Seattle deep. We just saw Josh Jacobs have another awesome day versus that Swiss cheese defense that couldn't look like it stopped anything. Minnesota game environments in general, I'm very into with a high pass rate offense, projected to score a lot, needing to win out. So Aaron Jones with his being able to get there versus the pass, and not just like dump offs, like explosive, like 20 plus pass plays in his belt, but then also just being able to salt away the game. And Pablo Gino behind a bad O-line gets out of hand quickly. So very, very okay with the Jones option. Kenneth Walker, full health, really strong coach speak about, hey, we're really comfortable with him. He looked really good in practice this week. Charbonnet also cleared, but we know that they tend to kind of go towards Walker for some of those, those workhorse type of roles, but I do expect Charbonnet to kind of take away some of the pass roll stuff. So Walker, not as much, but we know that his calling card is home run, hits. So, too big of those, that's game breaking potential. But really, I'm eyeing the Tennessee backs because Tony Pollard doesn't practice this week. Spears looking very explosive, very healthy, and either one of those guys is going to get, I expect, 75+% of the workload in a very nice matchup versus Indy. But most notably because Mason Rudolph is starting at quarterback. And I do think that raises the floor, at least drive to drive for the offense, sustaining and potentially scoring. So, and we've seen AR gift offenses with short fields. So, if Pollard's not likely to play, those are 2 backs that could stumble into stuff, and Spears specifically, He's really, really good via the pass game, and Mason's been able to feed guys late season for his tryout period, notably last year with Pittsburgh. So if Pollard misses any time or he's super banged up and they're going to lean on Spears, I do think Tennessee back getting a lot of the workload in a pretty soft matchup could be an interesting pivot off of. I like that more than like the Ford Brees Hall type of thing of guys seeding work in really, really rough matchups. Ford with Winston, much stronger play than with DTR. I think with DTR, the entire offense feels like something I'd rather avoid in these tournaments.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, if Tony Pollard were to sit, Tajay Spears is going to jump up, pretty close to that top tier of running back plays. He'd have a very, very strong projection. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. And I think in 12-mans, as things stand right now in like a 6-man draft, I'm probably not taking any Tajay Spears. But in 12-mans, I'd entertain it if I'm in the 6th round and I need a running back, 5th round. I think it's worthwhile to take a risk on in the event that Pollard is either limited or out. Could gain some great equity there. Really appreciate all the questions in the chat, guys. We will get to those shortly after we get through our position by position breakdown for the main slate from a battle royale perspective. Moving on to wide receiver here. There's a pretty big drop off to me after Amon-Ra's off the board, and especially after Devontae Adams is off the board. I mean, I think we know Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, these are all guys with great upside. I mean, I really love all three players. Chase pretty clearly our top projected option, followed by Nacua, about a 1.5 gap between the two, and then a 2-point drop off before you get to Jefferson, Adams, Amon-Ra. T. Higgins also projects really well for us as sort of a scroll down. Ryan, I'll start with you. Who else are you interested in here? I think the middle range for wide receiver is good, but I'm not like super in love with it. It's really the scroll down options, sub 33 or so ADP that I'm starting to get excited about.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, like, at the top, the two guys that I think matter as standalone plays that I really want to make sure I'm mixing exposures into on different lineups are Jamar Chase and Puka Nacua. Both just complete alphas, can absolutely go off in any given week. Chase has an ideal single high matchup against the Browns, and then Nacua we talked a little bit on Cashing Points about how they will just put him in the slot against the Bills 2 weeks ago, and potentially the same thing here with the Jets being somewhat of a slot funnel just to get Nacua his volume there against the easiest possible matchup. So I really like that. Other than that, in the middle tier, I'm fine with all these guys as like game stack bets. None of them particularly jump out, but as you said, the scroll downs is where it gets very exciting to me. So I'm just going to read off some names. We've got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Jordan Addison, Jawan Jennings, and Jacoby Myers. All 5 of those guys project for us within 0.1 points of Drake London, who is going as, I believe, the wide receiver 10 wide receiver 10 on this. So with that information, you should just be taking one of those guys on most builds, as far as I'm concerned. The ownership advantage you're going to get with any of them is so massive compared to any other wide receiver above a 30 ADP. And especially because there are so many of these different options that I don't think anyone is going to kind of concentrate around one particular scroll down. Obviously, ideally, you're working them into your game stacks as well. We already talked about Bears game stacks. Addison, very easy to do it with him and Hawkinson, with Sam Darnold. So that's more how I'm approaching wide receiver, as opposed to there being specific guys I like kind of towards the middle. I just want to mix in lots of these viable scroll downs into all of my builds.
Yeah, certainly think that is fair. I feel pretty similarly. Tyler, anything to add on wide receiver, any of these sort of later round options that particularly stick out to you?
Yeah, T. Higgins feels much more comfortable after basically they just let him rest, and all signs, both from himself and the coach, seemingly well. Although we did not get a running the hill confirmation, so that's TBD on comfort. But as far as his viability, it seems much better than it was early in the week. That said, for guys like Drake London and Tyreek Hill, both missing today with practice late in the week never bodes well, never feels very good. In Drake London's case, I think that bodes well for a guy like Mooney, who seems from a projected and game script and things we just mentioned with the Penix talking point, someone that his calling card's been explosive plays. That's where the Giants are weakest. That's where Kirk's been struggling the most to get him there, despite him seemingly separating well. And if Drake London missed today, well, that just meant that more reps for McLeod and Mooney with Penix today and potentially tomorrow, especially if it does hamper him. We've seen him kind of struggle. I mean, every receiver, if you're struggling with something in late week, typically kind of affects you. Same thing with Tyreek missing with a wrist and personal thing. It's just something to keep an eye on.
He better not be having another kid, man. That's way too many.
It said wrist and personal, so there was definitely writing too many checks, signing too many times for child support, and then he's just like, man, I gotta. But no, like guys, I'm really interested in. DJ Moore and Juwan Jennings stand out as guys who are likely to see a piss load of targets and pretty nice matchups. Malik Neighbors with Drew Lock, much more viable than Tommy DeVito. Atlanta is a really soft matchup for stuff like this at a macro level. And do expect that offense to struggle less, potentially just with a less limited play call sheet, with Penix being able to move around and make throws. And then Ridley and Myers both stand out. Ridley with Mason Rudolph just being able to get more consistent targets, less boneheaded plays potentially. We saw Pickens hit a very nice 3-4 game stretch with Mason just being able to point, click, midfield stuff. Ridley himself, far less efficient than a guy like Pickens, but if you're going to see 10 to 12 targets, that could potentially be huge, again, versus a pretty soft defense, all things considered. And then Jacoby Myers, same thing of like AOC, much better than Desmond Shitter at quarterback, and then Jacksonville just being the softest of soft tissue matchups for receivers. So I think nice boost for himself and Bowers. So those two guys feel very strong considering their target ceilings, their potential and propensity for touchdowns in the red zone, especially with just like weird Brock Bowers game scripts, nice leverage right off of that. The pool floaty I stole from Dallas coming off the wall midstream, just like that. That's how deflated I get when I think of Desmond Ridder killing Brock Bowers in round one. And then Jameson Williams just is like a big play machine attached to this big offense, being drafted far less often than Amon-Ra and Gibbs.
Yeah, certainly surprising to see how far you have to scroll to get down to guys like Ridley and Jacoby Myers. Certainly like the Darnell Mooney shout. And another guy that I wanted to throw out there, I think especially for like 12-person drafts, it's going to be really strong as a tournament option, is Rome Odunze. We talked about him a bit on caching points, but the note on Odunze was that he leads the league in end zone targets since the offensive coordinator change, and he ranks 7th in air yards over that span. Obviously underproduced because he also leads the league in uncatchable air yards over that span, but he is getting the targets, he's getting the end zone targets, and he's getting work downfield. So big games will probably come soon for a guy like Odunze. I don't know how much 6-man exposure I want for Odunze, but in these 12-person drafts, certainly think it's viable. All right, we can get to tight end, and then we can start drafting some teams and answering all of your guys' questions. Really appreciate everything in the chat. Tyler, I'll let you take tight end first. To me, this is sort of a week where I just want a top 4 tight end. I think Laporta and Hawkinson are fine too. But I really don't want to end up with any of these lesser options. I think there's a pretty big teardrop in tight end from the top options to, tight end 6, tight end 7, which is pretty standard. So I would imagine in like a 12-person draft, tight end will be a position I prioritize a little bit more, especially with how deep wide receiver is this week. I really think you can let wide receiver ride and just prioritize tight end, running back. What are your thoughts of tight end this week, Tyler?
I mean, Jonnu Smith stands out as the matchup seems fantastic. Waddle being out, Tyreek having some weird missed time Friday. He's already been fed like an elite tight end for the better part of 7-8 weeks now. So he's as strong as they get for outside the top 3 tight ends. I definitely want plenty of Jonnu this weekend. McBride getting the guarantee from Kyler Murray on TikTok saying we're gonna get him in the end zone this week. But Brock Bowers with AOC in at quarterback, a little bit banged up, but seemingly good enough to play. So obviously not someone I'm avoiding now. That Ritter's not throwing the ball. And then, I'm not really into Hawkinson or Kincaid as long as this offense is really kind of spreading the wealth elsewhere, seemingly with better options. Brenton Strange, I'm not opposed to, just given that his ceiling has been very strong and it is a pretty weak matchup. And Mac Jones hasn't looked complete dog shit and some of the last few series he's gotten. So if it's going to be consolidated down to BTJ moving the chains and Brenton Strange just being a PPR scam, all he needs, is to mix in a touchdown with some of that PPR scam. And Doug Peterson seemingly still fending off the "he's fired tomorrow" tweet from a month ago. So he's one I'm mixing in. I'm not really interested in anything outside of that. Banged up Njoku with DTR. I have very little interest in wanting to mix in there. I want to chase tight ends with huge target and touchdown ceilings, and those guys kind of stand out. Guys like Hunter Henry 2 months ago seemed like worthwhile clicks, but Austin Hooper's kind of eating into some of the deep target stuff, kind of taking away and capping that potential spike from Henry. Gesicki is not really viable as long as T. Higgins is playing, is what we've kind of seen. So I definitely agree that I want a lot of the top four guys. I'm willing to kind of push it to the Strange. I'm always willing to mix in a little bit of Strange, is what I'm trying to say. You're muted, Bubba.
I was saying, I'm sure you are, Tyler. Ryan, anything else to add at the tight end position?
Well, I guess first I just want to thank Tyler for being the first person on a show with me this week that is actually into Jonnu Smith. I feel like I've been on an island with my Jonnu Smith optimism.
I like Jonnu. I mean, I think he's a solid play.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think he's the best. I think he's the best tight end at cost in BR right now. He's the guy I want to have the most exposure to. I laid out the long argument on cashing points as well as in advanced matchups, but either way, whatever the 49ers do, it's just the perfect schematic for him, kind of whichever way they go. I'm kind of with Jake in terms of I want most of my builds to have a top four tight end. The only guy I would add and mention outside of game stacks, like Laporta and Hawk in game stacks are fine. But the scroll down I do want to mention is David Njoku. I get it's scary. I get it's DTR. I get all of that. Njoku last year in his 3 games with DTR was averaging 18 expected fantasy points per game, easily would lead all tight ends. He's just kind of DTR's guy that he peppers. Do I expect the offense to necessarily succeed? No, but as a battle royale scroll down that I can just click Njoku at the most volatile position and tough to project position and most touchdown reliant position, I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay clicking Njoku as a way to get unique. Definitely way better to click wide receiver scroll downs than David Njoku, but he is in play for me. So that was all I wanted to add.
Yeah, certainly think that's fair. For me, I think things die pretty hard, especially in 6-person drafts. After Njoku is off the board, rest of these options would probably only be 12-person absolute desperation 6th-round pick type selections. But let's get into some of these contests here. There was a little bit of overlay last week. I think I suggested pretty heavily that I thought the goal line stand would overlay significantly, and I think I was underestimating the appetite of underdog drafters for their 12-person drafts. Goal line stand either fully filled or got to 95%, so it was pretty close to the full fill. Super awesome that we have a 12-man draft with 20K to first. I absolutely love this contest. Main Battle Royale and the Wildcat are still the same. Same thing with the bomb and the fullback dive. So really not too much to add. I guess they're listing the QB sneak a little earlier than normal. Generally that will come out later Saturday night, early Sunday morning. Very, very small field contest there. Same thing with the blitz. Feel like they've generally been listing that later in the week. Oh, wow. And then the flea flicker is 10-person drafts, single entry 1K to first. So this is actually a new format. I don't believe we've seen a 10-person draft contest yet this season. So might be worthwhile trying to get into one of these tonight or at least over the
I
weekend.
just sworn I drafted this contest last week. Auto drafted the first 2 picks because it took about 20 minutes to fill, of course.
Yeah.
Salvaged it just fine for a min cash. But yeah, 10 man, a little interesting wrinkle there.
Yeah, that certainly is interesting. Tyler, while I'll see if I can get us into one of these larger, like 10 or 12 man drafts. Tyler, though, you were at the Dog Bowl, and I'm really, really curious what that experience was like. Obviously, for frequent viewers of the show, I was a bit of a Dog Bowl hater. I thought the rake was too high, and you're paying quite a bit for the social experience. Tyler, putting on the cowboy hat to tell us about his Dog Bowl experience. Really, really curious. I haven't talked yet to anybody who has been there, so really want to know what your experience was like.
I had a blast. I was Mathology's +1. He banked with a Justin Fields double, I believe, week 4 when they played Indianapolis, I believe.
Okay.
Pickens and Freiermuth. He was just like, I like this spot. I like the Fields. Anyway, so
I remember tilting Najee Harris very hard in that game.
Yeah,
that's
So he banks with that. I don't disagree. It wasn't my favorite tournament at all. It was definitely the type of tournament that I said I would love to silver bullet this, and if I don't, no worries.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough to become be so much fun online that I was going to be someone's +1 IRL. He told his wife, I won and I want to have fun. So I'm inviting Tyler. So 3 days in Dallas with my fellow bonk bro was a great time. Underdog rented out some beautiful, expensive Dallas. I can only describe them as porn mansions. I would love to be less crude, but these things have never been lived in, but they definitely have seen a lot of cameras and a lot of filming. Plenty of space in the living room for all sorts of couch escapades. But the fridges were stocked full of beer that we shut down the mansions back-to-back nights, Friday and Saturday, drank all their booze, had all their food, took as much merch as possible, got this little hat medallion from
Nice.
The hats were lovely. The logo hats were lovely, but they were designed by a lovely lady who did not realize that tiny hats don't fit big-ass man heads very well. So I had to kind of adjust it on the fly to my own personal stuff. But tons of great merch, tons of great people. The Underdog people were a blast. They took good care of everybody. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't fantastic, but they had DJ, lots of awesome food, lots of drinks, open bar the entire time. The bar we did a live sweat at Sunday was a blast with our all the TVs, the music, and the buffet set up with plenty of extracurriculars to do. Had a great time. They did us really well. Gave Rudman plenty of shit for having tiny calves and hiding them with his pants and running into Josh Norris and trying to make him blush. Just all types of good fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a great time. Did you guys get to go to the Monday night Cowboys game? Was that also in the cards for Dog? No? Okay.
Yeah, no, that was just their crew.
Gotcha.
All the Underdog crew up in the suite. I would have loved to go to the game. That said, hanging out with them all day Monday while they're whining and complaining about being hungover and tired. Although great game to go to, a lot of points scored. Sure, that would have been a blast. But no, yeah, the Dog Bowl ended Monday night. I think they basically put us up at there was an after party next door to the bar that we were at, and we kind of cranked that down between the steakhouse and that after party. And then funny story is that we're flying out early Monday, and Mathology was way too gone, and I was like, "Are you sure we're at the same airport? You want to Uber together, but are you sure we're at the same airport? I'm flying out of Love." And he's like, "Yeah." We get to the airport. I have express check through. I get through. I'm sitting there with my coffee, and he's again 2 sheets to the wind, and I just get a text that, "Bro, this isn't my airport." And the one thing he said before we left the hotel was, "I can't miss this flight. It's a connecting flight. I got to get this flight." He made it in time. And then I got roasted by Pete and everybody else for not being a good handler. But I'm like, I asked twice. I'm not asking a third fucking time. So if you can't figure out what airport you're at when we get in the Uber, not much I can do for you.
Yeah, there is only so much you can do. We are on the clock here. I got into a goal line stand draft. We drew the 104. Curious what you guys think, but to me, it's pretty clearly either like Chase Brown or Bijan. I really don't want to come back around to running back without getting one of these top 6 options.
I'm into Chase Brown.
Yeah, I am.
Yep,
as
agreed.
well.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, that works pretty well.
They're giving a little too much work to Tyler Algier, and Chase Brown's getting basically all of it. So that's my easy lean.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a Christian McCaffrey type workload for Chase Brown. So that makes him a pretty easy click. We're still 15 picks away, so we can finally get to some of these chat questions. Really appreciate all of these asks, guys. All right, first question from Dylan Nelson. JSN, Jonathan Taylor, Neighbors, London. He's asking us to choose 2 of these. To me, I think my initial lean would be JSN and probably Taylor. I'm curious what you guys think, but I think JSN is going to be one of these almost for certain, right, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm in the exact same spot as you. I'd go JSN pretty easily. Talked about Taylor, the game script stuff. Looks very good for him. Neighbors, it just scares me with Locke. But these have kind of been his 2 lowest volume games. Only about 13 catchable expected fantasy points per game with Locke. So yeah, I'm fine passing on Neighbors, passing on London. Give me JSN and Taylor.
Yeah. Tyler, do you have anything to add on that start set? I do think that's a pretty interesting question.
Yeah, I think in PPR, I'm willing to take the risk for Neighbors over Taylor. But if it's half PPR, I have a hard time disagreeing with the pretty good median floor ceiling JSN and Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, Neighbors' volume has been awesome. The problem is it hasn't all been catchable. So expected fantasy points doesn't necessarily steer you in the exactly perfect, direction with that. I think, shout out Jacob Gibbs, but, catchable air yards, catchable XFP matters a lot more than just raw XFP, raw air yards.
It totally does, but we've seen a player like Neighbors turn that into something. Like his first 3 weeks, it's not like he was getting glorious perfect passes. Plenty of those dimes passes were pretty rough, and Neighbors was just turning them into huge plays. So if it's PPR, I'm willing to say the volume and risk it for the biscuit, especially this week. The Jonathan Taylor stuff, I understand everything Ryan is saying. AR has really been brutal for this offense and brutal for Jonathan Taylor via anything but explosive runs.
Yeah.
And so it's just if you're asking me like 2 volatile options, I've seen Neighbors overcome it more often in plays like that. And for PPR, 7 receptions is kind of like the median line for it. I don't mind it as far as like padding some of the volatility and the catchable stuff.
Really, really tight in our projections. Our projections do give us slight lean to Taylor and JSN, but Neighbors is within 1/10 of a point of those 2. So certainly wouldn't fault you if you wanted to go Neighbors over there. My one concern with Jonathan Taylor is, does he remember that you have to bring the ball across the goal line to score touchdowns? He did seem to forget that last week, so might be worth.
Does Shane Steichen decide to give him an AR treatment this week and be like, "You're going to learn a lesson today, buddy.
You're going to learn from Trey Sermon. He's gonna fix this up."
I'm seeing weirder shit.
I mean, that literally did happen in like week 2 or 3, right? There was like, we can do our pick.
Right.
There was definitely rumors of bad blood there. Yeah.
We do have a pick here. I'm sort of immediately leaning towards Jonnu. Let's see if there's any top values by ADP. Yeah, I'm thinking either Kittle or Jonnu here. And I know, Ryan loves Jonnu. Tyler likes Jonnu. I like Jonnu. And we know tight end gets really, really gross if we wait until the 6th round. So I really like starting off here with a Chase Brown, Johnny Smith team. We can figure out our stack a little bit later, although we are 6 picks away. I think running back might be where I'm most tempted to go with this next selection. None of these plays particularly stick out. What do either of you guys think here?
I'm just thinking in terms of the easiest thing to do here is just get a cheap double stack.
We could go with the Bears, like DJ Moore.
Caleb
come back around
is definitely in play.
Yeah, and we know we can get
there's
Odunze in the
another
sixth
one.
round too. So
Yeah.
I don't, especially with none of these running backs particularly sticking out. I do kind of like the idea of going DJ Moore here, and then that gives us some flexibility with either a potential double stack. We could come around, grab Jameson. Yeah, certainly think that's viable. Tyler, any objections to making this a Caleb team?
I have no objections to DJ Moore, and if it ends up being a Caleb team, I'm okay with that.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, that sounds good to me. We got 15 picks until our next selection, so I'm sure we can cover another one of these playoff start sit questions. All right, Dylan Fink says full PPR. Okay, I believe this will be 2 questions. I'm looking at a lot of text, and I've had several Miller Lights, so please bear with me. Start 1, running back, 1 flex. Abdullah, Odunze, Spears, Strange, Madison. Obviously, if Tony Pollard sits, Spears is going to be, an auto play. If we assume Tony Pollard plays, obviously this is a much trickier question. I'm pretty privy to Odunze. Tyler, I'm really curious what you think here. Madison, like the projected workload is decent, but man, I mean, it's really hard for me to click a guy who's averaging 3.3 yards per carry.
The Madison Abdullah thing is simply game script, and it's hard to know how this game script's going to go against Jacksonville and with AOC. So if you want to avoid getting the wrong game script, it's really, if they're going to catch up, Abdullah is going to get targets. Will he get in the end zone? And then if they stay ahead, Madison, they can ride like the workhorse. Eileen, it's PPR. Strange is set to crush with just projected targets and volume. And no matter what the game script is, he's one of the only 2 viable targets on that team. So I think Odunze and Strange, if Pollard starts and we don't have any clarity. Otherwise, I think Strange probably projects safer as like the second top option. I'm really into Strange this week as just a better version of what Ingram's been this year. Which isn't surprising just because he's younger and hasn't been banged up.
Yeah, certainly think that's fair. And I think that was sort of my initial lean here, Odunze and Strange. And then, of course, with the caveat that if Pollard sits, you're auto starting Spears. Ryan, anything to add on that question? Because it is a bit of an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of you maybe have had too many Miller Lights because the question was start 1 running back, start 1 flex. And the answer you guys gave with Odunze and Strange does not include a running back, notably.
Because running backs don't matter, Ryan. Running backs don't matter.
Yeah, haven't you read a PFF article since 2018, Ryan? Running backs are, should be paid less than minimum wage. I think if you're starting,
they mattered, and they mattered through week 14 of this year, and then
that's true.
Just this past week, that suddenly changed again. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, with the caveat that we need to start a running back, I think I'd lean toward Spears. But yeah, Ryan, I'm curious what you say, and we will be on the clock here shortly, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I would start Spears regardless of Pollard being in or out. He's been kind of in this specialized receiving role over the past 2 games, has run a 51% route share average over that span. I think Tajay Spears is really good. I think Jacob Gibbs tweeted this out today, ranks top 5 in fantasy points per touch over his career among all running backs, which is pretty crazy. So Spears can win on game script, even if Pollard is in. Obviously, if Pollard is out or limited, he can win just on pure volume. So that's who I'd be going to. And then for the flex, Strange is my clear preference.
Yeah, certainly think that's fair. Keenan Allen is off the board here. We aren't too far from needing to draft our Caleb Williams share if we want it. Jameson Williams is also on the board. So I guess our decision point here is probably, do we want to go Caleb? Do we want to go Jameson? What do you guys think?
We can check the board for where the Keenan drafter is to figure out if it's worth pushing or not, because we do have a couple quarterbacks off.
Yeah, he would be going after us, I think. Yeah, we did end up drafting Caleb there. It's a shame with the 30-second clock. Really not ideal for a round table of 3 people to debate a pick with just 30 seconds on the board. But
no, I think it usually goes really well for nuanced conversation on the clock for multiple options.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I like Twitter as my favorite place for nuanced conversation, because of the character limit. It really speeds things up. So perfect.
I prefer the intellectual battlegrounds of the P-Hub comment section. Some really enlightened repertoire going on in those streets.
Yeah, a lot of interesting characters there. Can't say I participate in discussion very often, but more
More
of
of a lurker, a voyeur, if you will.
yeah. Some would call me more of a voyeur in that comment section for sure.
As an ass man, I've got to make my imprint in those streets. So
of course. Well, and I mean, Tyler, we were really just asking for a show like this after we decided to brand our separation score metric as ass. I think Tyler was pretty much a lock to join a Fantasy Point show at some point after that decision was made.
By the way, fantastic shirt, very comfortable, very high quality. Get yourself one, guys.
Yeah, definitely can get that in the Fantasy Point store. I think we're pretty much just going to auto take Jameson here unless one of you guys has an objection. We can look at what the running back board looks like. Pollard, Swift, Tracy. I don't really like any of these players. I don't mind a 3 wide receiver build here, so I think we just take JMO, right?
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. And then we can look at receivers. Yeah.
Sweet. Sounds good. The one thing I wanted to say about the Fantasy Points store, and this is something straight from Mr. CEO Scott Barrett, we went like as cheap as possible with everything, not in terms of quality, but in terms of price. Like we're very, very close to break even on all of our merch. I think like sweatshirts are only like $30, which has to make them some of the cheapest sweatshirts with a brand name on them, around, ignoring fantasy football just overall. So certainly think the Fantasy Point store is worth checking out if you want to get some merch and help support the company. Tout your love for ass, which I know Tyler certainly loves ass. All right, we're up in 14 picks, so we can get to another couple of questions here. Oh, our boy Dylan Fink had a couple more follow-up questions, even though we were drunkenly trying to get through the first one. He has another one. Pick one running back: Kenneth Walker, Jerome Ford, Kendre Miller, Tajay Spears. New Orleans is off the main slate. I haven't looked at Alvin Kamara's status. Do either of you guys have a lean on
Kamara's
out? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kamara's
totally
doubtful,
out.
but
Well,
it is PPR. Miller's not been a super strong target earner, and so and then Charbonnet healthy has been kind of taking the targets away from Walker, and we've seen a potential dip in production with calf returners at running back just for like the health standpoint. So it's like I kind of lean Spears or Ford unless you like your odds to get in the end zone with Kendre with a Spencer Rattler led offense, which feels equally terrible. So I kind of lean Ford. At least might consolidate the most workload, and we mentioned how efficient Spears has been, and if Pollard misses any time mid game or the whole game, he's obviously the go there.
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards Kendre Miller. Our projections have a pretty clear lean towards Miller. I mean, even if you knock him for the pass game involvement, I think the raw workload should be pretty good. Obviously, there are offensive concerns, but I think those are present with Jerome Ford as well. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I would also be going with Kendre Miller. So it's true as far as the pass game stuff. Yeah, he hasn't been that involved, but somebody has to be is the problem. Like there's have literally nobody. In our projections meeting this morning, I was making fun of Chris Wecht for giving Marquez Valdes-Scantling an 18% target share like that. That's what
are you going to do, man? I mean, they got
targets too, but yeah, that's
the Birmingham Stallions wide receiver 3 was this dude named Kevin Austin, who's now somehow the wide receiver 2 on the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there is going to be some checkdowns to Kendre Miller, whether especially at the running back position. Yes, running backs earn targets and all that, but at some point, if you're the guy on the field, especially with a backup quarterback, with an offense that's totally dead, that has nobody else on the field that can separate or get open, you're going to just get some dump offs, regardless of how good of a pass catcher you actually are. So yeah, I just clearly give it to Kendre just off projected volume. You don't love the game environment, but it's maybe they just try to go really run heavy. Maybe it's not a total disaster. I'd rather bet on that than the Ken Walker injury stuff in pretty much an equally difficult matchup.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. We are 2 picks away from our 6th round selection here. I have Odunze queued up. Maybe we could argue for one of these running backs here or another receiver, like a guy like Calvin Ridley. I like. I mean, we already talked about Darnell Mooney as a guy that we like. Man, I mean, even seeing Deebo Samuel on the board this late is a little bit tempting. Tyler, I'll start with you. Are there any other picks we should consider outside of the double with Odunze?
I think the Ridley volume in a similar type of bet of DJ Moore as like
Yeah.
potentially the alpha target earner in that game is definitely pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Rome is there, but as long as Keenan is going to be earning as many targets as he is, all roads do not lead to Rome these days. So he feels like a very random spike, and I just like the projected volume of Ridley for a similar type of bet.
Yeah, I mean, Ridley's volume has been awesome, and the only problem has been that Will Levis just can't hit him with catchable targets. I think Mason Rudolph should be able to do that a little more. Plus, I'm wearing Christmas attire. I got my Winnie the Pooh Christmas sweater on. Mason Rudolph, I mean, talk about Christmas spirit. I think we have to draft a guy catching passes from
Jake,
Rudolph.
did you get that sweater from taking so many L's in the cage match the last few months?
I actually bought it from Walmart. Which is completely unrelated to me taking tons of L's in the cage match. That's a Wednesday show that I do with Neil Orfield for those unfamiliar. My record isn't great, but many are saying that it should be significantly higher, and that Neil has made some questionable decisions that may have led to some fraudulent wins. I think some people are saying online. Either way, ended up with Caleb Williams, Chase Brown, DJ Moore, Jamison Williams, Calvin Ridley, Johnny Smith team. I really, really like this build. I think in particular in 12-person drafts this week, 3 wide receivers is really going to be what I end up leaning into unless I get like a miracle run out where I can end up with 2 of these, top 6 or so running backs with my first couple picks. But let's crank out a couple 6-man drafts here before we end the show. I'll hop into a Wildcat. While we wait for this to fill, we can. All right, Dylan Fink, last question that he had: 1 running back, 1 tight end, 1 defense. Kenneth Walker, Abdullah, Kendre Miller, Henry/Strange, and then Green Bay/Buffalo. With defense, I mean, the best I can do is just say check the projections. I never have a strong defense take. When it comes to Henry or Strange,
Buffalo projects pretty well going against New England for what it's worth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That does make sense. So I would probably lean Buffalo then. I'm always one to lean into the projections for defense. It's really just either Henry or Strange, or I think at least me and Ryan would lean Kendre Miller over Kenneth Walker and Abdullah. I would tier those Miller, K9, Abdullah. So Ryan, I'll throw it over to you. Do you have a lean between Henry and Strange?
Yeah, I'd go Strange. The volume's just going to be much better. Yes, he was clearly like meant to be a part of their offense. Got a ton of first read targets last week. Yeah, clear Brenton Strange for me.
Tyler, anything to add there? I don't know if I'm clearly Strange, but I do think I lean Strange.
Clearly Strange is a fantastic band title, and yeah. Strange Buffalo Miller.
Hell yeah. Love that. We drew the 104 here. This is a 6-man draft starting shortly. I think we can get to this question before we kick things off, though. Drake London or Jawan Jennings? This is, I'd imagine, a pretty tight one in our projections. My gut says Jawan, though. Do you guys have a take?
Jennings.
Yeah.
Yep, Jennings for me as well.
Yeah, they're neck and neck in our projections. Jennings is projected for 1/10 of a point higher than London. I do think there's just some, pretty broad uncertainty with what this Atlanta offense will look like now that they have inserted Michael Penix. Tyler rubbing off on me a little bit while I'm drinking these Miller Lights.
Whoa, buddy, my wife's in the other room. Don't talk about me rubbing you, brother.
Man. This has been quite the show, guys. But yeah, drew the 104 here. Ryan, I mean, I think we want to push for a double, top 6 running back start, right? And that is, generally speaking, pretty easy to do in these drafts. It would be a miracle if Saquon fell to us. That would be awesome at the 104. If not, maybe Bijan could come back around to like a Chase, a Connor, an Achane.
Yeah. Let's go Bijan just because there's more of it increases the chances another running back falls to us if we aren't reaching on one. So yeah.
Yep, certainly like that. And then we can go to Chase Brown or James Conner later on, HN in case of emergency. Let's see here. Looking through the chat, really appreciate all the questions, guys. Certainly getting the Tyler bump with our chat engagement. Tyler, before I get to another question here, we're about to come up on the clock, but then I will ask you something. Connor or Achan, unless you have a strong lean towards Puka, which I could also get behind, but man, I mean, there's just such a steep drop off after these two running backs are off the board. What are your thoughts?
I think I'm less scared of the running back drop off in 16. So
okay,
I think Puka's pretty decent here. But
what do you think, Tyler?
I love Connor, but Puka is really nice, and
okay.
I don't mind that at all.
All right, sweet. Let's go with that. Tyler, how have things been going over at the Fantasy Sanctuary? Really curious what you guys are up to over there. Fantastic.
Tom and Rich cranking out awesome material for, DFS and redraft, weekly write-ups, weekly start sits, matchup analysis, fantastic dynasty waivers and trade analysis. And then, it's just really fun getting to add on to that with the live shows on Underdog. And otherwise, sadly, got no stream drafts through, although thinking back to some of the craziness of the marathon stream we had and some of the guest, shenanigans, not surprising given the chaos of the season, but going fantastic on the road, maybe like 150 subs away from 3,500 on the Sanctuary channel. That's so awesome. Pushing for that at the end of the season. So if you're not subscribed to the Fantasy Sanctuary, do so. I'll be live there tomorrow. Doing some Underdog slate talk and drafts and chit-chatting. And then, as usual, I will be live Sunday morning giving start sit for everyone that wants assurances or to oppo me.
Absolutely love that. We got Bijan, we got Puka. Devontae Adams is on the board. I think this is a pretty easy stack here. We could round it out with
Puka Adams
with a Stafford. Puka Adams feels really, really strong. Ryan, do you want to talk about Devontae Adams really quick before we come up on our next pick here?
I would love to. Yeah. So Adams leads the NFL in target share since week 9. Over the past few weeks, he's just clearly had the volume edge over a Garrett Wilson. And that was even more the case after Wilson was just screaming at the top of his lungs at Aaron Rodgers on the sideline at one point last week. Jake might have the exact target totals after that, but it was just all Devontae Adams, and it makes sense. Like Rodgers is very spiteful. He just probably wants to get Devontae Adams his bag, let him put up some stats at the end of this season. So yeah, Adams, I think I talked about this on Cashing Points. I think Adams is just the key to making this game go off. Yep. If the game goes off, it'll be because Adams had some big plays. The Rams aren't going to do it themselves, but if they get pushed, then they certainly have a lot of upside. And I am into Stafford doubles for that reason.
Yeah, certainly like that call. Kittle or Jonnu, I think I'm pretty clearly team tight end with this pick. Tyler, I know we leaned Jonnu earlier. Still feeling that way?
Yeah, I mean, we could just build the all volume team here. I love Kittle, but if you're telling me that one of these guys is projected for like 9 receptions come this Sunday, I clearly want that guy because he's doing the same type of yak stuff that Kittle is doing, but he's very obviously the engine of the offense, even without one of Reek or Waddle limited or out. So having a hard time not wanting to jam as much Jonnu Smith as possible for being able to yak attack in Miami.
Yep, certainly love that call. Also love me some Jonnu this week. All right, coming up here, I think we can pretty safely take either Rodgers or Stafford for our last pick. We can debate that after our 5th round pick. We got Bijan, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Jonnu Smith. The question now becomes, do we want to go 3 wide receivers or do we want to go 2 running backs? Ryan, do you have a lean on who our next pick should be here?
I'm totally fine either direction. I think Taylor is good, and I think a 3 wide receiver build with Cooper Kupp specifically is very strong.
Okay.
Probably stronger than going Taylor, honestly. So yeah, if we are okay with making this a Stafford double, then I think I would just go Kupp.
Yeah, I am totally okay with that. So let's queue up Cooper Kupp. We can queue up Matthew Stafford. Then we can get to a couple more chat questions here. I think we can probably rip one more draft after this. I will. I know I mentioned to Ryan and Thomas before the show started that I wanted to start on time so that I could watch the Cincinnati Bearcats play the Dayton Flyers. I should be able to catch the second half of that game, but I'll sacrifice the first couple minutes of the second half to spend a little bit more time with my buddies Ryan and Tyler here.
The first few minutes are famously the best of college football. It's definitely not the last
basketball. College basketball.
Basketball.
I have completely given up on Bearcats football. It's over. We can't be good at
I was
both.
going to say, you're a dedicated fan.
Yo, yeah, man. It is bad in football land if you're a Cincinnati Bearcats fan. Basketball, looking a little bit better. We've never been good at both at the same time. You know, my dad's an old man. He went to UC. He's told me this. So we're really bad at football. I'm kind of hoping we can stay bad until we win that basketball national championship, and then we can do the old reverso. But this is going to end up being a pretty strong team. I really like this build. Assuming we don't get sniped, we won't get sniped because they both have quarterbacks. So we will end up with a Stafford, Bijan Robinson, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Jonnu Smith team. This feels great to me. Any thoughts on this team before we draft our final squad here?
Cooper Kupp, don't disappear once challenge, please.
Ryan, anything to add on that team?
Not really. No, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I do.
Jets are like this really big slot funnel. Michael Carter's been playing through a herniated disc all season, kind of been in and out of games. So I really like it. It's a game stack I like a lot this week.
Hell yeah,
Slot
love
funnel
that.
was my nickname in college.
I'm struggling to even interpret that one, Tyler. I think it's probably the Miller Lite.
Why don't you ask him for clarification? I'm sure.
I just don't know if this is the show for it. I mean, you know, someone can DM Scott Barrett the VOD, and then all of a sudden I have to have a chat with the boss.
Ryan, that's the dirty little secret. I dare you to ask for more information. I'll go down the rabbit hole.
I know. Tyler is a standing dare to ask him for more information. I mean, that is certainly no secret. While we wait for this draft to start, we can answer Albert's question. We drew the 105 here. Pick 2, half PPR, Devontae Smith, Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings. It's a really interesting question. Tyler, do you have a lean here?
Yeah, I kind of lean Smith and Jennings. Jennings feels very locked in as far as volume, matchup, and efficiency standpoint goes. The passing game in Philly looked pretty strong last week. Washington defense is pretty strong, but again, I'm kind of factoring in that A.J. Brown will play, but play at less than 100%, which means that Smith may end up being the number one target in that pass game, with A.J. Brown potentially going that way. Addison feels like a great piece to play for volatility, for touchdown upside, obviously, but it really does feel like if he's going to hit, it's going to hit because he's hitting on a big touchdown play. And it's if we're talking about consistency, I there's no bad option here. My initial lean is Smith and Jennings. I see the upside case for hey, Addison's huge games are much bigger than Smith's, but AJ Brown could come in hobbled and potentially exit the game. We've seen that with a lot of injuries like this, which would boost Devonta Smith's projection even more.
Yeah, I think my lean is a slight lean towards Jennings and Addison. I think Jennings pretty clearly my favorite. I know our projections like Addison over Smith. Ryan, do you have a take on this before we get to our first pick here? I'll probably just jam a running back.
Yeah, no, I'd be first of all, I'd either Chase Brown or Bijan. I'm cool with. But I would also lean toward Addison and Jennings. I will say for Devontae Smith, in games with either A.J. Brown or Dallas Goedert out, and reminder, Dallas Goedert out for the rest of the season, it is averaging, I believe, is the wide receiver 12 or the wide receiver 13 in fantasy points per game in that split. So, you could see the Eagles remain a bit more pass heavy like they were last week, but ultimately, I'm just going to lean into Addison and Jennings, who have been seeing just as strong target shares as Smith, just on offenses that I think are more likely to be throwing the ball.
Yep. Certainly think that's fair. Going to start this draft off with Bijan Robinson from the 105. To me, I mean, we did just draft a Puka team. I guess if Jefferson fell, I'd be a little bit tempted there, but I do really think, okay, Jefferson did fall. Tyler, what do you think? Do we want to go with maybe like a Darnold double here, some sort of game stack on Minnesota, Seattle?
Let's party like it's 1960 and go with the Temptations.
I'm
You were
probably a
tempted if you
little
take
too young
Justin
to
Jefferson.
understand what that means, but I'm just going to draft Justin Jefferson and assume that's what you
You said you'd be tempted if Justin Jefferson fell to us.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. See, this is the Miller Lite effect. You know, cashing points, I'm sharp. I'm with it. Underdog drafter party, I crack open a couple Miller Lights. I haven't had a ton to eat today, and you know, all of a sudden things get a little off the rails.
Jake, you could just say that I'm hard to keep up with. That's okay.
That's also true. That's
I'm trying to buck you, bud.
I can tell, man. I can tell. Certainly made for quite the interesting show. Started off here
Jake,
with
how many Miller Lights did you crush in between cashing points and getting on here when you said,
the thing is,
can we please start on time today, guys? I want to see the Bearcats game. It is the last one in StreamYard, including after the guest shows up too.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, that's completely ridiculous. But I will say it's only been, about 2 Miller Lights, but I'm on like a pretty empty stomach. So 2 Miller Lights when you're, don't have any food in you is like 4 Miller Lights, right? Like, come on.
Oh, buddy, that's tough to look in the camera and say that with a straight face.
I mean, do you disagree on the effect of alcohol on an empty stomach versus a full stomach?
When it's light beers, I agree with you in a vacuum. But the light beers, it's like I don't know, man. It's those are slow burns.
I mean, alcohol is alcohol, regardless if it's a light beer. If I was drinking a Blue Moon, I mean, it wouldn't change how drunk I am, which is only moderately tipsy.
I mean, it would though, right? Isn't that a different alcohol content?
I mean, no, I think they're both around 5%. Like, I don't think it's a significant change.
I just appreciate that you and my wife will both look me in the face and just be like, alcohol is alcohol, and I haven't eaten much today, and that's why I'm being bitchy tonight. No.
Oh man, I should not have agreed for this last draft. Man, this is absolutely brutal. We are on the clock, boys. What do we want to go with a game stack here? We could obviously just take a tight end and sort of put that off until our next pick. That's kind of my lean. We drafted a lot of Jonnu. Should we go Kittle here?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Switch it up.
All right.
Okay.
And then
way to go.
And then
we could have done Hawk, but it's fine. Just take
Nah. Yeah, let's go Kittle. Okay. Instead of roasting me for my alcohol intake, we need to decide what game we want to stack up. I know obviously Minnesota, Seattle seems to be the heavy favorite. How exactly do we want to do that? I think Metcalf is probably my favorite option on the Seattle side, especially relative to ADP, JSN going significantly higher. So it's really just about filling out the rest of this roster. I know Metcalf goes pretty late. Yeah, so we certainly don't have to take him here. Darnold goes late as well. Yeah, he's QB7. So maybe a running back here. We could go Chuba. We could also make this a 3 wide receiver build. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, let's do 1-2 running back build for the stream.
Okay, yeah, probably a good idea.
And then we can go with Metcalf or Addison, probably.
Yeah,
Metcalf.
I like Chuba a lot this week. He's projecting really well. I think my one caveat would be under no circumstances do I want a team that has both James Conner and Chuba Hubbard. Chuba we've seen get absolutely cooked in terms of both production and like just raw usage when Carolina falls way behind. And I think in a lot of scenarios where James Conner gets you 30 points, it's probably a 10 to 15 point win for Arizona in those games. So, it's something we've talked about on DFS shows before. There's, generally pretty negative correlation between running backs playing in the same game. So you generally want to avoid those in your lineup. And I think especially with this Arizona Carolina game, these guys project for great usage. I just don't want them on the same team. So I think that's an important note. So we sort of wrap things up here. I will queue up Metcalf. I will also queue up Sam Darnold. Let's see here. So we got Bijan, Chuba, Justin Jefferson, George Kittle. We're looking at Metcalf. We're looking at Darnold. I will take Darnold first since his ADP is notably higher. Or actually, no, we will take Metcalf first because The guy drafting in between us has already taken a quarterback. So if both players make it to us, should be able to make both selections rather painlessly.
He hasn't had that many Miller Lights if he's realizing that, if he's noticing that.
Oh my! I mean,
Like,
it's 2 beers, guys. Like I'm just a tad tipsy. It's a little tough for me to follow, all of Tyler's, just everything he's got going on. It's just a bit much for a guy in my mental state right now. And it's been a long day, but can't complain. Can't complain at all. Certainly has been a great show.
You were Zeusian just then with all those T alliterations. I was titillated. I was very intrigued. I was very into it. Also, our drafting partner Chip Skylark took down the BR this year.
Oh hell yeah!
So, also just want to shout out that I think Aaron Jones is definitely in the same tier as Chuba, and for this build would have made a lot of sense as well as a Minnesota double given his pass game usage. So I think those are very viable if you're building. I'm very into Minnesota doubles this week, and I think I want to have versions with Jefferson, Addison, Jefferson, Jones, Addison, Jones, and then sprinkle in a little Hawkinson, who did get a red zone target. What was it? 2 weeks ago, and just off the tips of his fingers. So obviously would have been a huge game for him if he had caught that. So definitely into those iterations with Darnold.
Yeah, certainly like that. I think, if you're drafting for volume at all, always important to mix up your stacks a ton. And there's a lot of fun ways you can do that with Sam Darnold here. All right, so we will end the stream on a Sam Darnold, Bijan Robinson, Chuba Hubbard, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, George Kittle team. Got to say, I really like this team. A lot of alphas here, a lot of guys with great usage. Certainly see a ton of upside, especially for a tournament like the Wildcat that has a ton of entries. Tyler, I know I already asked you this, but why don't you shout out your stuff one last time before we get out of here? Where can people find you on Twitter? What kind of content are you doing?
On Twitter, I am at emo__cowboy. If you don't mind reading tweets that may not be safe for work, in all of the worst, most non-sexual ways. No, I'm just trying to make Jake as uncomfortable as possible as we end out here. But yeah, follow me on Twitter. I retweet a bunch of the best health doctors this site has to offer. I feel like that's the one last great edge for your weekly redrafts, DFS, props, etc. And then, for video content, I'm over on the Fantasy Sanctuary with Tom and Rich. We cover everything you need, DraftKings, drafters, game day, DFS, dynasty, redraft, best ball, all that good stuff, pre-records, lives, awesome Discord, very cheap memberships to be able to get involved. We're big on community. We're on the road to 3,500 subs. We've been doing a lot of giveaways when we hit milestones. So we're cooking up another fun giveaway if we can hit 3,500 before the end of the year. And then we're right around the corner before I just start ripping it in big boards that famously dropped before the Super Bowl ended last year. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, come check us out. We've got everything you need and more.
Yeah, certainly love that. Love the crew over at the Fantasy Sanctuary. Tyler, you also said your tweets may not be safe for work. I can say pretty firmly they are not. They are not safe for work. Ryan, what about you? Where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at RyanJ_Heath. I tweet exclusively safe for work stuff, very buttoned up on Twitter. Kind of the exact opposite of Tyler. But aside from that, find my work on FantasyPoints.com. Advanced Matchups is out every Friday morning. It's out right now. Go read it.
Yeah, and same thing for me. All my stuff can be found over at FantasyPoints.com. Definitely hop in our Discord if you guys want to ask me or Ryan any sort of Battle Royale type questions. Our Discord's free to join. Like I said, a lot of the best channels are paywalled, but Underdog Battle Royale channel, totally free. I'll drop rankings in there. You can ask me and Ryan as many questions as you please in there. We're generally pretty active Saturday, Sunday morning. Well, that'll do it for the Week 16 edition of the Underdog Drafter Party. Big thanks to Tyler for joining us this week as our very special guest. As always, thanks to Ryan. Thanks to Thomas behind the glass. And we will see all of you guys at the top of the leaderboards.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.